Philp, Louise Haigh told me this morning pretty clearly that the government is contemplating paying countries like Vietnam and Kurdistan in a deal to keep migrants away from Britain. Would you support such a deal?
Yes, we'd support any plan which cuts or stops the illegal crossings over the English Channel. In fact, what they're proposing appears to build on work the previous Conservative government had already been doing. So we would support that. However, on its own, it clearly won't be enough. What we need is a deterrent. And that is why it was such a huge mistake for the incoming Labour government to cancel the Rwanda deterrent scheme before it had even started. It was due to start on the 24th of July. They cancelled it. And in the absence of that deterrent, of course, people are going to keep crossing. And that is why numbers crossing the English Channel have gone up significantly since Labour came to office.
But you bunged away something north of 500 million on the Rwanda scheme. Now you're going to support something which some people might say is just throwing good money after bad.
Well, look, we need to stop these crossings and we'll constructively support the government where they have initiatives. But the initiatives they're announcing are not going to be enough. They are not on their own going to work, because I think, as the National Crime Agency themselves have said, as even Martin Hewitt, their new border czar, has said, you need a deterrent as well, and that means removing people who have arrived here illegally.
But if Rwanda was a deterrent, why isn't a deal with Kurdistan or Turkey going to be equally a deterrent?
Well, they're completely different things. So just to be clear, they are not proposing, as far as I can see, to return people, have a returns agreement with those countries. They're proposing to work with those countries to prevent departures in the first place. Okay. Now, that's all well and good. I'm, perfectly happy to support that, but it's not going to work as a deterrent. To deter people, they need to know that if they illegally and dangerously cross the English Channel, they are going to be immediately removed somewhere else. And that's what Rwanda did. And these deals don't do that.
You're talking about the deterrent, but actually, whereas Rwanda basically only got 4 people, I think, most of them members of government, to go to Rwanda, the Italian scheme has cut the boat crossings into Italy by, I think, 62%. This sounds like a better bet, don't you think?
Oh, first of all, the Rwanda scheme never actually started. It was due to start on the 24th of July.
And you spent 700 million on it.
And it would have saved us a lot of money had it been started, because the deterrent would have stopped people crossing the English Channel. We know that because it worked in Australia. Now, you mentioned the Libya deal. Now, that's a little bit different, because what Italy did with Libya was stop people departing from the coast of Libya in the direction of the small islands. I think Lampedusa is one, and the Italian mainland. That is not what Labour is currently proposing. They're not proposing to stop people embarking from France. They're trying to stop people leaving Vietnam or Kurdistan in the first place. Now, that's all well and good, but it won't stop the boats, whereas our Rwanda scheme would have done, and that's why the Labour Party were wrong to cancel it before it even started.
But just to be clear, you will support it, even if it's not.
I mean, look, it's a constructive step, but it's not going to fix the problem on its own.
Let's talk about the farmers. We know that you back the farmers on inheritance tax, but are you happy about their tactics, threatening to empty the shelves of supermarkets, for example?
Well, first of all, I think what the Labour government has done to farmers is absolutely shocking. It means that, according to DEFRA's figures, something like 3/4 of farmers are not going to be able to leave their farms to their children or their grandchildren. And these are farmers that, they're not well off particularly. They're often actually struggling to make ends meet, because farming is not very profitable these days. And of course, we rely on farmers for our food security. So the fact that Labour has declared war on farmers is obviously bad for farmers, but it's actually bad for all of us, because it'll undermine our food security, and Trevor, it'll increase our food prices.
We understand the case, and in fact, I'm going to be talking to the boss of the NFU later on. But what about their tactics? Is the Conservative Party comfortable with farmers essentially doing what French farmers have been doing for years, which is threatening to block up roads, threatening to make people uncomfortable and hungry and so on?
Well, I think people have a right to protest, and obviously we respect the right to protest within the law. So, and it's up to Parliament to set where the law sits. So I think providing they're behaving lawfully, legally, then they do have a right to protest. And I understand why they feel so strongly, because their livelihoods are threatened. But moreover, it's likely that food prices for the rest of us are going to go up as a result of Labour's assault on farmers.
Yeah, but you, actually, one of the things that you lot banged on a lot about when you were in government was disruptive protest. Surely you should be wagging your finger at the farmers as well now. This is just Stop Oil, only with Barber boots on.
Well, I said within the law. Now, if they're going to have a protest and come to the centre of London to protest, as many groups do and many groups have over the years, then that is lawful and that is reasonable. What Just Stop Oil were doing was repeatedly, again and again and again, deliberately blocking roads, not as part of a protest, but simply to inconvenience the public, and that is different. That is unlawful.
All right. Let's talk about another issue which has exercised your leader. She's called for a review of hate crime laws. Now, you were Minister for Crime for the last 2 years of the Conservative government. Didn't you notice that people's collars were being felt by the police for what they called hate speech? And why didn't you do something about it then?
Well, I did. It did concern me, and I did do something, because the police should not be acting as the thought police, particularly in relation to journalists, but actually more widely as well. Free speech is very important. We have a criminal threshold, and the police should only get involved where that criminal threshold is met. If they're looking at non-criminal incidents, that should be extremely rare, and it should only happen where there is a real risk of imminent criminality. That's a very high threshold. So I was concerned, and I did take action, together with the then Home Secretary, which was to restrict the circumstances in which the police could record people's personal details for these so-called non-crime hate incidents. And I had intended to go further, but for the election. And what concerns me is that the new Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper, is apparently planning to undo those changes that I made a few months ago.
Do you not accept her case, which is that recording non-crime hate incidents is in principle important if we are to chart the rise and fall of this kind of prejudice?
Well, of course, things like, anti-Semitism and other forms of hatred are recorded by all kinds of organisations. The police should only be recording this kind of information, which falls below the criminal threshold, if there is a real and imminent risk of criminality following. Because for a start, if someone gets a full criminal record check done, that will get disclosed. Now, some cases have been reported this week by The Times, for example, where 9-year-old children were getting their details recorded as non-crime hate incidents for things happening in playgrounds. A Telegraph journalist, a different Telegraph journalist, said they were investigated for making comments on the trans debate. Now, that is wrong. People should have the right to free speech, and the police should not be policing thought.
Your leader used the word trivial in respect of what I think she meant some of these kinds of complaints. Anti-Semitism, anti-Muslim prejudice, trivial?
No, they're not trivial. They're very serious indeed. And inciting racial or religious hatred is rightly a criminal offence under section, I think, 17 of the Public Order Act. But things like, what children say in playgrounds, journalists participating in the trans debate. That latter point is about free speech, particularly for journalists, but actually for everybody as well. And the police should not be wasting time and resources policing thought. They should be concentrating on criminality.
The House of Commons is shortly to have a debate on the bill brought forward by Kim Leadbitter on physician-assisted death. Will you support it?
So first of all, it's important to make clear this is a free vote, so the parties, political parties, do not have a position, and so my view is a personal one. It's not one on behalf of the opposition or my party. And I think, by the way, Wes Streeting was quite naughty earlier this week to use his position as Health Secretary to make government arguments on one side.
Yeah, don't make it partisan. I'm asking about you.
But in terms of my personal view, look, there's two things to balance up here. One is our regard for the sanctity of life. Now, I personally do believe in the sanctity of life. I would never want to engage in assisted dying or assisted suicide myself. I wouldn't want my family to. I would never encourage anyone to. But I also respect personal choice and personal liberty. And I don't want to use my the power of my vote in Parliament to stop somebody else exercising a choice in certain very restricted circumstances. So for that reason of personal liberty, and personal choice, providing the safeguards are very, very strong, and the space in which this can be done is quite narrow. So I think it's, last 6 months of life, in pain, no coercion, 2 doctors sign it off, a judge and so on. I would be prepared to support this on the grounds that I respect other people's right to make their own choice, even though it's a choice I myself would, I hope, never make. Okay. I would never encourage any of my friends or family to do so, because I do believe in the sanctity of life, but I also believe in people's personal choice and personal liberty. And that's how I will, I think, balance up those two very difficult competing considerations.
Philp, thank you so much for your time this morning.
Thank you.